Okay, and welcome back. Hour number 2, and we get to talk to a gentleman who has been on a couple, 3 times before. He is an avid, a voracious reader, and he retains an extraordinary amount of data from the material he reads. I don't know, he probably reads enough to equal what 100 people read now. His name is Herbert Dorsey. Herb lives in the beautiful state of Hawaii, and he's standing by right now. Hello, Herb. Are you there?
Yes, I am, Jeff.
Welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back.
What have you been doing, Herb?
Oh, we've been having an adventurous time out here. We were right in the middle of a big lava flow in Hawaii that disrupted so many people's lives. we had to be evacuated out of our homes. Yeah, we were evacuated from our homes several times.
So you were on the Big Island, right?
Yeah.
In and around the lava flow.
Puna.
I covered.
Yeah. Right in the Puna area where the lava was flowing.
Wow.
We lost an entire farm to the lava flow.
You lost your farm?
Yeah, we lost a farm. We had 2 farms, luckily, and another house, so we were okay. I mean, we had places we could go, but we had to be evacuated about 3 times.
Wow. I haven't heard much about that lately, Herb. Has it calmed down now? Is it pretty stable?
Oh, yeah. We're in the reconstruction phase now.
Oh.
They're trying to reconstruct some of the roads and get so there's a lot of people. There was over 700 houses destroyed, but only there was still a lot more that weren't destroyed, but the roads were cut off, so people can't get to their homes.
I remember seeing the video of the lava crossing the roads, 6 feet tall in places.
Yeah, it was scary.
Extraordinary. Wow.
It was. But anyway, that's not what I want to talk about tonight. I want to get into the area of what's being wrongly taught in our universities. And you remember William Tompkins. I know you had a few interviews with him.
Well, we did over 50 hours of interviews on this program.
Exactly. And William Tompkins, one of the things he said was, everything that's taught in our universities is wrong. And I pretty much agree with him on maybe not everything, but there is a lot that is taught to us that is not correct at all. And that's what I want to cover tonight.
There's an agenda, Herb, there's an agenda, and a lot of it is institutionalized naivete. The academic community does not like change. I don't know why, but it generally just likes to stay where it's in its comfort zone. Let's put it that way.
Right. So I want to go over some of the inconsistencies in the scientific field. I could also get into politics and history, which is, but I want to stick to the scientific field tonight. And so I was going to start with Tesla. He was one of the greatest scientists in American history, and Tesla was experimenting with electricity before they knew about electrons or even had thought of the idea of an electron. And Tesla was, well, you might say he was an experimental scientist rather than a theoretical scientist. And so everything he said was backed up by an experiment that he had done. And so basically it wasn't based on anybody's theory. It was based on experimental fact. So that's an important thing to consider. Yeah, in our universities, I have a degree in electrical engineering. No mention of Tesla was ever given in any of my classes. The only time it was brought up is when I brought it up to a professor. So, I mean, that's amazing in itself, because he was the one who gave us our electrical transmission system that we use in the United States now. He gave us radio. He was the actual inventor of radio. Marconi duplicated a lot of his inventions. And
duplicated? You mean he stole them? Yeah,
he stole them and then claimed they were his own, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyway, so at one day in my physics class, the physics instructor was talking about transverse electromagnetic waves. And I brought up a question. I said, well, what about what about longitudinal electromagnetic waves? And the professor said, oh, they've been mathematically proven to be impossible. And I said, well, wait a minute. Nikola Tesla was using spherical antennas on top of his Tesla coils. And a spherical antenna can only transmit longitudinal electromagnetic waves. And he had a real disgusted look on his face and waved me aside. He goes, I don't want to discuss Tesla. And that was kind of a shock to me because I thought universities were a place for the free exchange of ideas. And I suddenly found out that they weren't.
No.
But anyway, any competent electrical engineer knows that all the electric fields have to radiate directly at right angles to the metallic surface that is creating the electric field. So if you have a spherical antenna, the electric fields can only point either directly away from the center of that sphere, or directly towards the center of the sphere. There's no other way the electric fields can configure themselves, and every electrical engineer knows that fact. So here we have Tesla with his Tesla coil creating millions of volts of electricity, and they terminate in a sphere at the top. And so the waves that are coming off of that sphere are going directly away in all directions from that sphere, and the E field vectors are all pointing in the direction of travel or against the direction of travel, depending on whether it's a positive cycle or the negative cycle. So that's the only kind of wave, a longitudinal wave is the only kind of wave that can come from a spherical antenna. Okay. The next interesting thing is all the magnetic fields from a spherical antenna are canceled. So the wave that's coming out of there is not really an electromagnetic wave. It's actually an electrogravity wave. The field exchanges between electric and gravity rather than between electric and magnetism. And I point this out in several of my books. But the other thing that's interesting...
A question about Tesla and spherical antennas.
Okay.
We're talking about Wycliffe, anyway, the so-called free energy tower that he built in New York. That had a very large spherical antenna on it, did it not?
Yep. Well, it was a segmented sphere. It had a lot of elements that were in a spherical arrangement, but it was segmented. The one in Colorado Springs, where he did all his defining experiments, where he discovered that he could create a standing wave pattern in the Earth. He could send radio waves out that would circle all around the world and come back again, and that would create a standing wave if they were the right frequency. And that wave traveled between the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth. And later on, another physicist named Otto Schumann, discovered that the frequency was about 7 or 8 hertz or cycles per second, and that's known as the Schumann resonance. Well, Tesla was able to send out different frequencies that would be whole wave multiples of this resonance, and you can create standing waves. And a standing wave has the property that you can keep pumping energy into it, and they won't dissipate. They'll just keep getting larger and larger and larger. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is, one, they don't want to teach about Tesla, and two, they have erroneous theories about things like longitudinal waves. They think they don't even exist when they do. And the other thing about a longitudinal wave, its velocity is faster than the speed of light. And Tesla made that announcement. He did a number of experiments. Another feature of longitudinal waves is they can be transmitted right through conductors. And so they can be used in seawater, and submarines can use them to communicate underwater, where regular radio waves would not work.
Now, does this go back to the extreme low frequency Gwen towers, the transmission lines that were designed theoretically to communicate with submarines?
That's another technology. Okay, that was another technology. They used extremely long wavelengths that were like maybe about, I'd say maybe several hundred of them could circle the Earth. That's how long the wavelength. They were miles and miles long.
That's long. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was slightly different technology. They could also, for these really long waves, they could also transmit through seawater, to a limited degree. The longitudinal waves worked a lot better. In fact, these longitudinal waves, Tesla, his description of them were like sound waves in the ether. And the regular sound that goes through our atmosphere, those are longitudinal waves. And Tesla believed in the ether, and any true scientist still believes in the ether in spite of all the talk against ether. Because, well, for example, how does an electric charge work? You know, I asked this of many of my physics instructors, and none of them could answer the question. And one of them said, well, the physics is only to explain how things work. They don't explain why they work. I was kind of put off by that answer. But anyway, a charge can be explained if you say that, like, the electron is a source of an ether current. It's throwing out a current of ether from the electron. The proton is sucking in a current of ether, and that creates the positive-negative charge. Now, naturally, if you have something that's throwing stuff out and something that's sucking it in, they're going to be attracted together. But if you have two things that are throwing stuff out, they're going to be repelled. And so we see that like charges repel, and unlike charges attract. So if you use ether, you can start explaining what these charges are and how they work. But without ether, there's no way that science can tell you how action at a distance works. Action at a distance is like magnetism can attract another magnet towards it or repel it, and a charge can attract another charge or repel it. That's an action at a distance. There's no mechanical device tying the two together or a spring pushing them apart or anything like that. It's action at a distance. It can work in outer space as well as in the atmosphere. So science can't explain action at a distance unless they use an intermediate substance like ether. Another point is every electrical engineer knows that free space, like a vacuum, has certain characteristics. It has what's known as a constant of permeability, which allows the magnetic field to go through space. It has a constant of permittivity, which lets the electric field go through space. And space has a natural impedance, which is 377 ohms. Now, if space was totally empty, it wouldn't have any physical characteristics. But these characteristics that I've just mentioned are all characteristics of the ether. So space is not empty. It's full of something. We can call it the ether, or you can call it the zero-point energy, or all the other fantastic inventions they've come up with in physics. But anyway, I don't know if you got any of those charts or materials that I sent to Frank Chile. He said he was going to forward them to you. I don't know if you got any of that material or not.
It's hard to know. I'm going to go look again. I get hundreds of emails a day, and it's just difficult.
Let me
go see if I did.
Well, I'll keep talking while you're looking. Is that okay?
I just got it.
Okay. What did you get? What do you got?
Table of differences between standard model and ECE.
Yeah.
I got that.
Yeah, that's one of them. Well, I'll talk about that, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In modern physics, when I was going to university, I was like in the 80s, early 80s, when I graduated. I took some side courses in physics, like I took some astrophysics, solid-state physics, and quantum mechanics and stuff like that, because I really I was curious and wanted to learn about these things. In astrophysics, they talk about the Big Bang Theory. You hear about dark matter. Yeah. You know, all that stuff. Well, I'm telling you, it's BS. There was no Big Bang. Okay.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. I've never liked that whole theory, and I understand that galaxies are moving away from us, but that doesn't necessarily mean there had to be a Big Bang, does it?
That's right. There's other explanations, including there's this one theory out there. It's called the Reciprocal theory of space and time, and it started out with one postulate that everything, all that exists, is motion. And from that postulate, they said, okay, now motion is space divided by time, right? So the idea of reciprocal is time is the reciprocal of space. And this theory got really involved. It was by a very well-known chemist. He was an expert in chemistry. But he came up with this theory. I can't remember the name of the guy. But you can find it on the internet. Just look up reciprocal theory. But anyway, he was able to say that, well, the primary motion of space is a scalar motion, which means it doesn't have any direction. So how can motion not have a direction?
Well, another question, if I might, please. It's important, and this is a word that gets thrown around by people who have absolutely no knowledge of physics or anything of the sort, and yet they throw the word scalar around like it's a common noun. And it's
it is a common noun, but I'll explain a scalar to you.
Yeah, okay. Do, please, because I've heard it for years. Yeah. I don't know what it is. It's some exotic, supposedly. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Thomas Bearden has come up with a scalar electromagnetics, which is an interesting thing. I have a lot of
I had conversations with Tom 25 years ago about this. Yes, he's a brilliant man.
That's right. Okay. Just to be simple, it's a common noun used in physics. A scalar is a quantity that has a physical quantity, but it has no directed quantity, as opposed to a vector. A vector has a direction as well as a amount of quantity, like a speed is velocity. That is a vector because speed has to be in a direction. You're moving 50 miles an hour due north or something like that.
Right.
Where a scalar would be something like pressure. You got air pressure, but which direction is it going? It goes in all directions equally. So that pressure is a scalar. There's other things like temperature. Does temperature have a direction? No, but it has a magnitude. Well, temperature is a scalar. So a vector would be like an electric field. The E field it's a vector that points away from the positive and towards the negative. And so it has a direction depending on where the negative and positive charges are in space. So there really is. It is a noun. A scalar is that which doesn't have a direction, basically. It has a quantity but no direction. That would be the way I would define a scalar. Well, anyway, getting back to this reciprocal theory, the scalar motion was supposed to be everything's moving at the speed of light in every direction. That was the basis of this theory. And he said, oh my God, that's impossible, I think. But anyway, he was able to develop this theory and explain all the the total atomic theory. He was able to explain it using his theory. So it was fascinating to me, but I never fully could understand how you could have motion at the speed of light in all directions equally in our universe.
No, that's a pretty good trick to try and contemplate. Wow.
But anyway, somebody who really is curious about it can look up reciprocal theory. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that too much.
When I said that people use scalar all the time, scalar this, scalar that, no one could even speak one sentence to really define it that I've ever run into. It's just a word. It's a noun that they use randomly to connote something eclectic, esoteric, far out, cool, whatever. It's a word that is used a lot, but people just don't have. Well, you just gave us more information on the word scalar than I've heard in 25 years.
Okay, now I'll get into Thomas Bearden's scalar electromagnetics a little bit. Whenever you have you have two radio waves coming at each other, and each one is exact same frequency, same phase, and all of that.
Okay.
And conventional electromagnetic theory, if you have two of those radio waves and they're 180 degrees out of phase, they'll totally cancel each other out. And there'll be no result, and all that energy will just cancel out, and there won't be anything left. Well, Thomas Bearden says that when you take those two radio waves and you're canceling out all the electric fields and magnetic fields, which are vectors, but there's still a pressure there. And he says that pressure has been reduced from three-dimensional space to the other dimension, which is time, because we live in a four-dimensional space-time continuum. So now the scalar wave is created when you bring these two conventional waves together and cancel them out. You create a scalar wave. And the scalar wave only exists in the dimension of time. It doesn't exist in the dimension of space. So that's what's fascinating about a scalar wave. Now,
all right, hold on, Herbert. We got to pause, please. Another word that people use all the time with scalar, although more than scalar, is the word quantum. quantum this, quantum that, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Maybe you can define quantum for us when we get back in a few minutes. I'm sure some do, but honestly, it's one of those buzzwords that kind of the new age people like to use. Quantum. All right, quantum. We'll be right back to continue our quantum conversation with Herbert Dorsey in just a couple of minutes. Hang on. Okay, welcome back. Todd and I are working feverishly during the commercials to try to get this new protocol, these instruments, these numbers all entered in the proper fields so we can connect digitally over Verizon at 300 plus megabits per second, which is a lot better than my normal desktop speed, which is 1.7 megabytes per second. So anyway, we're going to get it done. So thank you all for being so patient. It has not been fun to be on the telephone. Oh, with Herb, always fun. But I mean, as far as speaking, it's tough. So now that's a quantum scalar statement, isn't it, Herb?
Well, I was going to get into quantum since you wanted to get into it.
I'm having fun here. I'm just being silly.
Yeah, I know you are. I know. Okay, you asked about quantum mechanics or quantum whatever. What was discovered early on in the 20th century was that a scientist named Planck found out that
Max Planck.
He couldn't explain the black body radiation unless he was able to divide light up into little particles.
Right.
And so he created this unit called Planck's constant. And I'll just give you a quick idea. It's a very small unit. It's about 6.6 times 10 to the minus 34 joule seconds, just to give you an idea how small it is. Now, if you multiply Planck's constant, which I just told you what it was, by the frequency of light, you get what's known as a photon, or the energy of a light photon. So suddenly this disrupted the general trend of physics at the time, and people wanted to know, well, why is light not a continuous energy? You know, like they thought before was just a continuous wave energy. Why is it divided up into little photons? So then they started doing all this looking into the physics, and they started realizing, well, there's other things that are quantized too. And so they started this whole thing called quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics is kind of weird. It doesn't seem to make sense yet to the world that we're used to living in. And they came up with Schrodinger's wave equation, which is a wave of probability. So now you get things in the quantum world. You get things they can exist in many different states simultaneously, and only when this wave function collapses by an observation can you limit it to just one state. So now we got quantum computers going now where they're using qubits that can be in multiple states. It's not just on or off like your digital computer. It can be in more than two states. And then when you collapse the wave function, it comes into one state. But anyway, that gives you a little idea of what quantum is, or quantum mechanics. It was based on quantizing objects that they used to think were continuous and didn't have any. They weren't any. In fact, there's a Planck length, a unit of length is quantized. If you go below that, there's nothing, according to the physics. And there's a Planck unit of energy, Planck's constant. But anyway, that's sort of sums it up, I would say. What I wanted to get into is that chart you were talking about that you received from Frank Chile, showing the difference between the standard model of physics, which is what's taught in our universities today, is the standard model, and this new revised theory is called the Einstein Carton-Evans theory, or the ECE theory. And the ECE theory, for one thing, standard theory of physics cannot unify quantum mechanics with classical mechanics, with electromagnetic theory, and with general relativity, all three of those areas are like separate areas of physics with no unification between them. Well, the ECE model can unify all those things. So they had a completely unifying theory now that unifies electromagnetic theory with gravitational theory with quantum mechanics. And so that's a very big improvement in a theoretical situation. This ECE theory also is able to prove that all physical phenomena is geometrical. It's all based on geometry. And this,
wait a minute. This is, hold on, I'm going to think about this just a second.
Yeah.
All phenomena are geometrical.
Give me a
couple of examples, please.
Well, I'll give you an example with Einstein's theory of relativity. It's based on the geometry of space-time. And he says the space-time curvature is what causes the gravitational attraction. So he explains gravity by the curvature of space-time. Well, where the ECE theory improves on the Einstein theory is that they said, well, Einstein forgot about torsion in space. He was talking about curvature of space, which gravity, when it causes gravity. But he failed to bring in the torsion aspect of space. This is what Carton, that was what he contributed to the theory. The idea of torsion, the saying that space is twisting like a tornado or anything that spins, it creates a torsion field. Okay, well, when you get into the geometry that includes torsion, now you get electrical phenomena. You can explain where the magnetism of electricity came from. So that's why all the phenomena that we experience is based on geometry. Does that make any sense to you? A
little bit, yeah.
Okay, well, I have to tell you this. I gave you that chart so I can show you the improvements that the new theory has over the old theory of general relativity and the standard model of physics. The standard model of physics, what's wrong, one of the big faults, is it has a lot of ad hoc assumptions. And to give you an example, they invented these things called gluons that are supposed to exist inside the nucleus of the atom. And the gluons are what
How do you spell that? How do you spell that?
GLUE, like glue, except it's a gluon.
GL?
UE, glue, and then an ON on the end. Now they invented gluons to explain why you can have two protons right next to each other in an atomic nucleus, and they don't repel each other because they're both positively charged. And so they invented gluons, which transmits what they call the strong force. Okay, well, more recently, a brilliant scientist by the name of Nassim Haramein published a peer-reviewed paper showing that the nucleus, the neutron, or the proton I should say, is actually a mini black hole. It's a little mini black hole that exists in the center of the universe.
A proton is a mini black hole.
According to Nassim Haramein.
Huh.
And he wrote he got his paper published. And anyway, he says this explains why the gravitational attraction between the two protons is so strong that it overcomes the repulsion, electrostatic repulsion of the two protons in the nucleus. And he says we can do away with the strong force and the hypothetical gluons and all that. I'm just using that as an example. They also invented dark matter. They invented, virtual particles. They invented all these things to explain phenomena that they couldn't explain from things that were actually experimentally observed. So the ECE theory does away with all those ad hoc assumptions and unprovable and unverified experimental inventions that the standard model has. And has done away with it all and cleaned up the whole thing to a point where now they can say, well, all your physical phenomena is based on a higher order geometry of space-time. So I think that's beautiful. and people need to study the theory. In fact, millions of people already have.
Logical. It makes sense. I mean, when you think about it.
Now,
you don't think about it, it doesn't make sense at all, come to think of it. Now, there's a quantum statement again, wasn't it? All right.
It's vastly, the ECE theory is a vast improvement, by orders of magnitude.
Up with the ECE theory, Herb?
A guy by the name of Evans, Myron Evans.
All right.
And he recently passed away, so I should say the late Myron Evans. But anyway, the theory's been around.
That sounds like a pretty major step forward.
Oh, it is. It is. In fact, they have a website. I want to give you their website. It's the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies is the name of their organization, and and their website is like the initials www.AIAS for Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies .US for it shows it's in the U.S., not in Russia, or like that would be .RU. So it's AIAS.US is their website. And I really, anybody who really wants to know the leading edge of physics, I advise them to go to that site. Okay. Anyway. I was going to get back into scalar a little bit before we got on to quantum. The thing about whenever you have something that's oscillated in the time dimension, it's transferred instantaneously. There's no speed of light limitation. You could, if you had a scalar transmitter of enough power, you could transmit a signal to our nearest star, and it would get there right now. It wouldn't be 4 years from now. It'd be right now. So
wait a minute. Whoa. That sounds like it goes against Einstein's theory.
Oh, Einstein's already needs to be replaced. I can tell you a number of things that show that Einstein was wrong.
So we're talking about instantaneous
communication.
In other words, right now. But it still takes a moment to initiate something, and then there's a response. Are you saying there's no time between initiation and response? It's that instant.
It's instantaneous transmission of information over interstellar distances, providing you have the power.
That's how ET travels then, perhaps.
Well, it could be. They might travel through the time domain instead of the space domain.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's a number of scientists that back this up. This isn't just not one scientist. There's a Russian scientist named Kozyrev. And Kozyrev started experimenting with what he calls torsion mechanics. He developed a way to detect torsion waves and torsion fields. And he noticed that whenever he had a telescope, he had pointed at, say, a star, and then he would get a torsion signal. But whenever you point a telescope at the star, you're pointing at where the star was light years ago, depending on how many light years.
It may be gone.
That's not where its present position is in the sky.
Yeah,
right?
And it might be gone as well, right?
See, Alpha Centauri is 4 light years away, right? So if you're pointing your telescope at what seems to be Alpha Centauri, you're looking at where it was 4 years ago, not where it is right now, right? Okay, so what Kozyrev noticed was when he was using a scalar wave detector, he could point the telescope to where the present position of the star is and get a much stronger reading than where he was at the optical position in the sky. And he finally came to the conclusion.
How is he getting a reading when he can't see it? He projected the movement of the star.
Can predict.
I understand. But
they can predict the truth.
What is he using to get a reading?
He has a telescope. But he has a screen on it that screens out the optical light and detects the scalar signal instead of the optical signal.
Really?
Okay.
Now the scalar signal again is not some electromagnetic energy. It's not the energy of light. What is it?
It's what was put on in the time domain, like Bearden explains. The scalar energy is your electromagnetic wave that has been canceled out of the spatial domain, but still exists in the time domain. See, so it's basically a time wave. And now here's the deal. every place in the universe, no matter how far away it is from us, has the same instant of time. So time is not relative either. So you throw Einstein out the book.
Is time just a silly construct that we carbon-based units have come up with?
It was there before we were ever created. That's for sure. Time has always been there.
We never know what was around 4 billion, 5 billion years ago. I don't know.
Well, okay.
Maybe some.
But anyway, the idea.
It's another
the
quantum
concept,
problem, Herb.
Okay.
I'm just trying to have fun with this stuff. All right.
I know. Okay. Now, Cozy Rev, and he's not the only one. He says, "Well, look, time is the same everywhere in the universe. Right now is right now everywhere else too. So if you're sending something over the time dimension, it gets there right now. It don't get there light years from now. You go across the galaxy, it's 100 light years across the Milky Way. You could send a message to a star on the other side of the Milky Way. It would take 100,000 years to get there. We get there right now. See, so this torsion field or scalar field, they're both identical apparently, as an instantaneous form of communication. Cozy Rev experimentally, he did a lot of experiments. He measured, he came to the conclusion that it was at least 10 to the 9th times faster, 10 to the 9th power times faster than the speed of light, if it wasn't instantaneous. That was his, what his conclusion was. So that's pretty damn fast. Okay, so
all
anyway,
right, so there we are. We either have instantaneous, or we have 10 to the 9th power, or 10 to the 10th power, but we still have damn fast, all right?
That's damn fast. Light is fast enough, but if you go billions and billions of times faster than the speed of light, then you're really fast. So anyway, now I got to mention another scientist. His name's Eric Dollard.
I've heard the name.
Eric Dollard is a brilliant guy. Eric Dollard, he actually worked in Bolinas, California, on a big transmitter that was there. It's called the Alexanderson transmitter. And Eric Dollard said the type of transmitter that was developed by Nikola Tesla and this guy, Alexanderson, was they jointly developed the system. It also transmits instantaneously. Okay, they had a transmitter in Bolinas, California. They had another one in Hawaii, and they transmitted back and forth instantaneously. And he said the U.S. Navy was using that for quite a while. Okay, so they already developed instantaneous transmission now. Eric Dollard, he has an interesting website. I sent you a list of websites via Frank Chili. I don't know if you got that list, but I can tell you.
Yeah, I've got a list of websites here, yes, and I don't know what you'd like me to do with them, but I've got them.
Do you see the top one?
I've got AIAS.us, for example. I've got them all.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, you got the one that says superliminaltransmissions.com? Should be on the top of the list there. Superliminal transmission.
Extra luminal, not super. Extra luminal transmission.
Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot the actual URL. But anyway, that one is, if you go to that website, you'll see what I'm talking about as far as Eric Dollard and this instantaneous transmission system.
Let me read this here. Wireless transmission systems are limited to the speed of light, but only if the signals are electromagnetic in nature. Got it. Interesting.
Okay. What else does it say?
Tesla and Alexanderson engineered wireless transmission systems with no such limitations that were fully operational by 1917, thereby disproving Einstein's relativity before it was even believed by the general scientific community.
Now, isn't that kind of amazing?
So
That's
we
kind
are
of amazing,
so far, and when you think of most common physics today, you think of Einstein, and it's like folklore stuff compared to where we really are.
A lot of stuff is wrong. A lot of Einstein stuff
all wrong.
is wrong.
Well, Einstein worked in the patent office. We know that argument too. I don't know if it's true, but certainly if something came in front of him that was of great interest, he wouldn't forget about it working in the patent office. All right, I don't know what happened, but what you're saying here, Herb, is that Einstein's theory of relativity was history before it was even widely accepted or
it's already disproven.
Or embraced.
It was disproven by this Alexandrian transmission system. It was jointly developed with him and Nikola Tesla. Okay,
so that's how far ahead Tesla was. That's pretty darn far.
I'll tell you something about Einstein. He really didn't. He wasn't that good of a mathematician. Okay. When he developed his general theory of relativity, you know who did the math work for him? His second wife. She was the mathematical genius.
I remember this. She was the genius behind the. See, Einstein was more of a merchandiser, a marketer. He knew how to promote. He knew how to hustle and promote. He used her brains for a lot of his work.
That was for his general theory of relativity. She didn't know. She knew how to do all this tensor mathematics and all this high-level stuff, where you're dealing in higher dimensions and all that. And there's, if anybody who's got into the real general theory of relativity and studied knows what I'm talking about. It's very involved mathematics, and his theory was. See what Evans said about him. This guy who developed this ECE theory. He said Einstein was communicating with Carton, and Carton tried to explain to him that space also has torsion as well as curvature. And Einstein didn't even understand what Carton was trying to tell him, and so he didn't incorporate it into his general theory of relativity. But if he would have done that, he would have been able to unify gravity with electromagnetism, because you see, the electromagnetism is due to the torsion of space-time, where gravity is due to the curvature of space-time. So I mean,
how very interesting.
He wasn't really that big of a genius. I don't know why everybody worshipped him as much as they did.
He was a marketing success, I'm telling you.
But anyway,
all right, we've got to pause. Hang on. I want to say hello to Frank and to Scott Perez, who's listening in as well. I don't know if you've spoken to Scott yet or not, but you should. He's a brilliant man like you are. Okay, hold on. Herbert Dorsey and I will be right back to continue our quantum discussion on physics in a minute. Okay, and we are back. Glad you're along. Yes, we were working during the break. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. All right. Now, we're talking with Herbert Dorsey about a lot of things. I've always felt, honestly, for a long, long time, that there was something suspicious about Einstein. This is long before I heard about his job in the patent office, scientific patent office. Then I learned about how he had used the brilliance of his second wife. She's a genius mathematician. And that kind of made me, well, I was less than impressed. I'm beginning to suspect now that the Einstein cult is exactly what it is. It's a cult, and it's predicated on the cult of the man who knew how to market himself in the media. His hair was all teased up. You know the story. It's okay. But if this is all true, Einstein is less than important. He's a footnote. Well, I'm going to read this again. Yeah,
okay.
By Eric Dollard. Eric Dollard.
Yeah. Oh,
why
now,
hold on.
Jeff?
Let me read this. Yeah, go ahead, Herb. What?
The reason I like doing this show is I believe in trying to educate the public about what is wrong with our present setup and educational system, and other areas too. But tonight I want to focus on that. Let me read this.
Go ahead, Herb.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead. We got a little bit of a delay.
One of my early interviews with you made a really nice video that went along with the vocal part of the interview. And in that video, you showed pictures of UCSB and stuff like that. It was relevant to what I was talking about. And I would just make a request that if it makes a similar video of this one, where you put in the material I sent you via Frank Chile as an educational means to, so people who want to know more about what I'm talking about, there's websites they can go to find out more, just like the extra luminal transmission one that you're talking about. And so anybody who listens to this transcript later on can also see the list of websites, see what's wrong with the standard model of physics and how the ECE theory is a big improvement on it, and other things like that. That would be a simple request that I would.
Well, I'll see if I can have my audio editor put those things into a YouTube video on this. Yes, I will do that.
That would be nice if you could. I'd really appreciate it, Jeff. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Now, let me read this by scientist Eric P. Dollard. This is fascinating. And I've, like many of you out there, been aware of the astonishing mind of Nikola Tesla and others. It's just amazing when I read. I read this and I had to read it again. Wireless transmission systems are limited to the speed of light, but only if the signals are electromagnetic in nature. Tesla and Alexanderson engineered wireless transmission systems with no such limitations that were fully operational by 1917, thereby disproving Einstein's relativity before it was even generally believed by the scientific community. That's a mouthful.
I know.
That's how far behind we are.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Jeff. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to discuss a few more things that's wrong with electromagnetic theory, and then I want to get into free energy machines and how they can work. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. In electromagnetic theory, they falsely teach you what they call Maxwell's equations, but they're not Maxwell's equations at all. There's Oliver Haveside's truncation of Maxwell's equations. His original equations had 20 different equations to explain electromagnetic theory, and Haveside reduced that down to 4 vector equations. Now, I'm not demeaning what Haveside did. He developed vector math, which made it much easier to understand what Maxwell was doing. Eric Dollard even says, hey, what Maxwell, his original equations, most people wouldn't even be able to understand it or figure it out. And Oliver Haveside was able to make it where it was understandable. But anyway, the truncated version, though, leaves out a lot of phenomena, electromagnetic phenomena that is possible, but the reduced equations don't show where it could happen. So this has been a big drawback for electrical engineers. And one thing I want to just mention is this thing called the Coulomb Gauge. The Coulomb Gauge basically was set up to make things more symmetrical. But what it says is the divergence of the what they call the magnetic potential vector. It's known as A in electromagnetic engineering. The A vector. The divergence of the A vector is set to 0. The divergence is set to 0. And when they did that, they automatically made it impossible to unify electromagnetic magnetic theory as developed by Maxwell with gravitational theory. Because, see, the divergence of that, the gravitational field is directly related to that divergence of the A vector.
All right.
Okay, so that's just for your electrical engineers in the audience so they can figure it out. In my book, I have a book out there. It's called The Covert Colonization of Our Solar System by Herbert Dorsey. That's me. And I bring this up in my chapter on scalar physics. I have a chapter called Scalar Physics in that book.
Right.
And it's mainly for mathematicians, people with a mathematical background. But I show in there how not only is free energy possible, but also it also unified. I showed how you could unify electromagnetism and gravity in that particular chapter. And basically, this was before I even heard of the Alpha Institute of Advanced Science or Advanced Studies. And later on, I found out they were also able to unify the two theories. And so, anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, let me just make a statement from the peanut gallery here. If all of this is true, and I certainly believe it is, we are so far beyond Einstein, he really shouldn't be talked about much, except as a footnote of early physics.
Well, okay, now the book that I just mentioned to you, The Covert Colonization of Our Solar System, what does that imply? What does that title imply?
Well, I follow you. You've been on a number of times before, and I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell our listeners a little bit more. Go ahead.
They have a secret space program where they have tremendously advanced technology that's possible by looking into the stuff that I'm talking about tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have anti-gravity. They don't use rockets for their secret space program.
We have a whole space fleet up there, as Bill Tompkins revealed on this program.
Right. Exactly.
And I have photographs of a lot of these craft that were taken by John Leonard Walson 10 and 15 years ago in the UK. They're in orbit parked. Some of them, they don't look like sleek Commando Cody spaceships. They look like big pieces of machinery. But that's what they are. They don't have big spacecraft.
If they're operating in space, they don't have to be streamlined. There's no air friction.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. But anyway, so they do have covert colonies and operations going in our solar system right now. And they have a colony on Mars. Corey Goods talked about that quite a bit, as well as
now he's fallen into a little bit of a cloud lately. Just to FYI you on that. Okay.
Well, I know. I've heard the scuttlebutt.
I'm not. Yeah.
There's
a lot of stuff out there. I'd rather keep the conversation right where it is. So let's go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, there's a lot of advanced technology that's totally classified and kept secret from the general public, and they do have transmission systems that work instantaneously. They don't, if you want to talk to Mars from Earth, it takes, if it's an astronomical unit away, it all depends on where Mars is in its orbit. But say it was an astronomical unit away, it would take 9 minutes for our signal to get to Mars. If we asked them a question, it would take another 9 minutes for the answer to get back to us. So that's almost 20 minutes trying to communicate something back and forth. They don't do that. They have scalar stuff that works instantaneously. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
So is that another thing we can put on the table and hang on to it, that scalar is almost a synonym for instantaneous?
Well, a scalar wave or scalar electromagnetic wave is instantaneous. Yes, you can put that on the table.
All right.
Okay. It doesn't have any speed of light limitation. But anyway, and another book I wrote is called Secret Science and the Secret Space Program. I have chapters on free energy. I have a chapter on what's wrong with some of the science we got out there now, which and why I call it secret science, because it's not being taught in our school systems, so it's been kept secret from us. Okay, but anyway, in that book, I had a chapter on the German flying saucers that were developed by Germany in the 1930s and 40s. And a key person in this whole thing was Maria Orsic. She was a psychic medium who basically channeled these beings from Aldebaran, which is in the constellation of Taurus, and they sent her telepathically a whole set of plans for a flying saucer. But the instructions were in an ancient language they didn't understand, but they later found out it was Sumerian, the language of Sumerian. In fact, they called themselves the Sumi and claimed that they were the ones that created the Sumerian civilization.
That's where Orsic got her data. How interesting.
That's
Frank,
where she got it
would
from.
you please make sure you send Herb the video I put together with the actual piece of film showing a German flying saucer flying over the runway from above? That's a little piece of film that somebody might be 1.5 feet long. We don't know, but it's stunning,
nice.
and I want you to see that. So Frank will
send I have to tell you, I've already seen a lot of videos of German flying saucers. I met Vladimir Terzhersky in 1990 at a UFO expo in Los Angeles, and he supplied me with all kind of data on the German flying saucers.
Now wait. I know of Vladimir. I didn't know him. Terzhersky. I think he was on the program once, long time ago. Okay.
I knew him personally.
Did he give you actual black and white film footage of
He gave me VHS
German
videotapes. They were VHS videotapes.
All right, and this is motion pictures on video of German flying saucers.
Exactly.
All right, I would very much like to see that to compare it with what I have, the small clip I have.
All my VHS videotapes are all no longer functional. Out here in Hawaii, Hawaii raises hell with videotapes. Salt water. We live a couple of blocks from the beach. Get saltwater contamination, all kind of problems.
You mean your tapes won't play anymore? Is that what you're saying?
Nope, they won't play anymore. They haven't played for the last 10 years. I'm sorry.
Well,
I've seen them. I'm just telling you, I've seen them.
This is a huge
That's
loss.
how I could write. But I've seen them. I've seen documentation that Vladimir Terzhersky supplied me with. He studied at the Russian Academy of Science, and he was living there. He was originally from Bulgaria. He speaks fluent Russian. He was living in the Soviet Union at the time of what they call glasnost, or openness, and all the secret programs that the Soviets had been involved in. Suddenly the scientists were allowed to talk about them, and he was able to get access to a lot of this recovered German technology that the Russians or the Soviets had recovered. They got more scientists than we got in paperclip. Do you know that?
All right.
The Russians actually got even more than we did.
Wait. You're saying that the Russians got more German scientists than we did?
That's right. They did.
Sorry to hear that. I heard it was like maybe 30%. We got 70%. Our first director, NASA. You know who the director of NASA was? Our first NASA director?
The Russians got there way before the Americans did.
All right. Well, our first NASA director was for 13 years, 1962 to 1973, or thereabout, Dr. Kurt Debus. Dr. Debus was Hitler's man in charge of Peenemünde.
That's right.
And he brought Werner von Braun with him and about 1,000 other German engineers and technologically brilliant.
But Germany had a lot more than that. Believe me, they had a lot more than that.
I understand that. I understand. That's how they got their. That's how they beat us with the first satellite in 1957.
That's right. and I got other news for you. People that believe the Cold War was real, at a higher level of secrecy, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were cooperating in space. Did you know that?
Well, I think that I do know that the space program, as we have been fed it, has been a complete misdirection and a canard.
It was a smokescreen.
That's right.
NASA was a smokescreen to make people think we needed rockets to get out into space. When a portion of our secret government already had the German anti-gravity technology.
Right. Yeah. And it worked. It was a brilliant ploy. It worked.
It had us all fooled, including me. Okay, but anyway, I was going to talk a little bit about. I was going to get into how I really did a thorough investigation of the real flying saucers that the Germans had developed using Maria Orsick's.
Let me say one thing, Herb, for the audience.
Okay.
There were two parallel German flying saucer programs. We'll call it simple.
There was more than two.
We could say anti-gravity, whatever. One was run by the SS, and the other was more of a civilian-oriented group led by Maria Orsick. Go ahead.
Right. Okay, Maria Orsick started the Real Society. She was the one who started it. And originally, her society was all female, and all the females had psychic ability. And they had the idea, we got these long ponytails, which were not in fashion at that time in history. But all her psychic mediums had long ponytails. And they claimed that their long hair was like an antenna that made them able to receive psychic messages much easier.
You know, I still believe that. I think that long hair in general is another sensory organ that we are born with, and for some reason, the idea of hair cutting that extrasensory modality out of use is intentional.
Could be. That's why they want all their military people having shaved heads, basically.
That's right. And I won't say that barbers are all involved in a conspiracy, but the net result is when you cut off the hair, apparently it does have an impact on some sensory abilities. That's what I'm told.
Extrasensory. Okay, now, anyway, so I did a lot of research from many different sources, including Vladimir Terzirsky, including a guy named Maximilian who wrote a number of things about Maria Orsick. And I tried to find out, well, what's the working principle of these levity discs or flying saucers that Maria Orsick had channeled, but she gave the information to Otto Schumann, Professor Otto Schumann, who worked at the University of Munich. Schumann became famous later on because he discovered the Schumann resonance of the planet Earth. They call it the Schumann resonance.
That's the same Schumann. All right, interesting. The Schumann resonance was it 9.37 or something like that?
Around, I think it's 7.8 hertz, something like that.
But it changed. It supposedly is higher. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But anyway, so Schumann was the one who developed the levity disc based on Maria Orsick's information. They were being financed by the Tool Society, which they had a lot of contacts between the Real Society and the Tool Society. The Real Society
Thule for you listening. Thule. And when you say
like
levity, that's a funny term, Herb. Levity disc.
They called it they called it the levity disc, but actually the Germans had a different name for it. The Germans call it their otherworld flying machine, or they have it in German. It's called that. I can't even remember the German word right now. It's in my book. But anyway, the initials were JFM for. F was Flug and M was machine, Flug machine. And I think it was Jenseits Flug machine was what the Germans called it. And Jenseits means other world, and Flug means flying, and machine is machine. So they call it the JFM series. But a lot of them people called it the Searle levity disc. That was another term. And he was considered the father of the German, or the Vril levity disc. Schumann was. So when he comes to America in Operation Paperclip, he never has that distinction attached to his name at all. Isn't that interesting?
Fascinating.
That's all part of. Yeah, it's all because they want to keep it all hushed up and secret. So they don't want to mention levity disc or the Vril disc or anything like that. So there's been a lot of secret stuff that's been hidden from the public.
Yes, indeed. All right. We have to pause one more time. We have a half an hour to go with Herbert Dorsey. And Herb's books are available. Just Dorsey, D-O-R-S-E-Y, easy to know. And remember, Hang on, Herb. We'll be right back. This has been fascinating. Stand by. Okay, and welcome back. We are talking to Herb Dorsey about a lot of very interesting and eclectic things. Physics, and I hope we haven't left everyone behind. Believe me, I'm trying to stay up with it as well. It's an avalanche of fascinating material. The most important thing I think that we can reiterate here is that what the average individual perceives as our reality is perceiving a lie. We have physics, science, 20, 30, 40, 50, depending on the discipline, 100 years ahead of where anyone would imagine. We have deep space fleets. We have been all over the solar system. We probably have bases on Mars and have had for decades. We probably have bases on the moon. We probably know all about life on Mars. There's life on Mars. We probably know what happened to Mars. Maybe we figured that out. Something blew the hell out of everything over there because there's wreckage all over the surface of the place. That's the reality of what we're in. We're being kept back, if I can stretch this a little bit, we're being held back in what would almost be like the 17th century compared to the true 20th or 21st century. We're just lied to. They're keeping us captive. They're not allowing all of this advanced technology to come forward and help us save and preserve what's left of the planet. They don't seem to be concerned at all that the planet is dying physically. We're dying physically. We're not going to live as long as our parents. On average, mentally, the millennials and the others who are addicted to their phones, they're dying mentally. They're just not proactive about life. They're all now reactive, drooling, Pavlovian zombies. All right. Go ahead, Herb.
Okay. I was talking about the Searle levity disk, and I wanted to know what the operating principle was. And I finally, after much research, found out what the operating principle was. And what it is, if you take two counter-rotating magnetic fields, and they're strong enough, you rotate them fast enough and the magnetic fields are strong enough, they also create counter-rotating torsion fields, because every magnet is also generating a torsion field, by the way. Anyway, when you rotate these fields fast enough and they're strong enough, they create a separate bubble of space-time around the area that's affected by these fields. Now, what that does, it insulates everything inside of that field, that bubble, that independent bubble of space-time. What it does is insulates it from gravity, so gravity no longer affects what's inside that field. It also cuts off the relative inertia between the outside space and the inside space. So you could say that this is not only gives the German levity disk the ability to levitate off the ground, but it also allows us to do right-angle turns at tremendous velocities, where your g-forces are going to, they should be like way over 10 g's, which is about the limit that a human body can stand. Well, these guys are going thousands of miles an hour and do right-angle turns. That would be like hundreds of g's. So right. How is that possible? Well, the inertia has been insulated by this field that you set up, and that's how the German levity disks work. And I published that in my book, Secret Science and the Secret Space Program. That's in the chapter on the German flying saucers. Okay, now what surprised me, when I wrote that, I didn't even know about the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies. I didn't know about that. I found out about that a couple of years later. To my surprise, their advanced mathematical physics predicts the same thing with counter-rotating magnetic fields. So that was kind of like a confirmation of what I had discovered from my own research. So that was kind of made me feel better, But anyway, now I want to get into free energy technology and discuss a few free energy concepts. My own houses, are all solar powered, so we're already enjoy free energy anyway.
Right.
Solar is a very reliable source of free energy, and I recommend everybody get it while they can. But there's other technologies that generate free energy besides solar panels and wind and all that. And I'm going to speak about one principle that they always use to debunk free energy is, you got the conservation of the thermodynamics, conservation of energy theorem and all that. Well, I got to make a statement that only works in an enclosed system, a system that's totally insulated from the outside world. But there is no such thing as a closed system. Why? Well, we got a neutrino flux coming in from outer space. It's billions of neutrinos per second per square centimeter. I mean, it's tremendous. So even inside of a vacuum tube, electronic vacuum tube, inside a cylinder of an engine, you got all these neutrinos coming in all the time. They go through the Earth. I mean, neutrinos are only slowed down by the planet Earth, so they can penetrate everything. So you don't have a closed system right there. But there's so many. So as Thomas Bearden points out, when you have an open system, it's possible to tap energy from sources outside of what you're doing because it's an open system. But anyway, I'm going to discuss a few of these open system free energy machines. And one of them is very simple. I can just verbally explain how it works, and any backyard mechanic could make one. You have this principle. It's called piezoelectricity. Piezoelectricity is you squeeze a quartz crystal and it generates a very high voltage. I mean, you can generate thousands of volts with maybe 100 pounds of force on one of these crystals, okay? So it generates a very high voltage. Yeah, and it's well known in physics. There's nothing secret about it. It's used in a lot of devices we have, like phonograph needles. They have microphones and all that stuff. Okay, so this guy named Milosavljevic invented what I call a pendulum on a seesaw. He had a seesaw. He had like a lever arm and two sides of a fulcrum. That's what a seesaw is, basically. And on one side, he had a pendulum swinging back and forth, right? Okay, now, the interesting thing about a pendulum is the downward force of a pendulum keeps varying at different parts of the swing of the pendulum. Like when it's at the bottom of the swing, the pendulum is moving the fastest, and so there's more centrifugal force at the bottom of the swing, and that's added to the weight of the pendulum. But at the top of the swing, especially if you have one that swings through a circle of arc, at the top of the swing, that thing is weightless. It's like in a free fall at the top of the swing. So there's no weight. The pendulum weight is zero, acting on the arm, the moving arm of the pendulum. There's zero downward force at the top of the swing if it's a semicircle swing, and there's no centrifugal force because the motion is dropped to zero there. That's when it stops going up and starts to move down again. So you have no centrifugal force, and the physical weight force has also been reduced considerably, depending on how big of an arc the thing's swinging through. So anyway, this variable up and down force went into the pendulum. It's varied and it's transmitted to the other side of the seesaw. And say like you got a 10-foot lever arm on the side with your pendulum, and you got a 1-foot lever arm on the other side of the fulcrum. Well, your leverage is going to multiply the downward force by 10 in that case. So now you got a piezoelectric crystal on the other side, and this pendulum might be varying 10 by 10 pounds as it swings, just as an example. Well, that's going to multiply the force on that crystal by 10 times, so you got 100 pounds varying force, squeezing that crystal and then releasing and then squeezing it. And that creates a variable voltage. And you can run a variable voltage transformer. You can transfer that thousands of volts of piezo voltage down to maybe 110 volts or whatever. And then you're going to magnify the current because see, the piezo current would be small at first, but you go through the transformer, you transform the current up as you transform the voltage down. So now you got a free energy generator. You say, well, wait a minute, the pendulum will slow down due to air resistance. Well, that's true. Well, this guy named Bandini came along, and John Bandini, and I'm sure you're familiar with him.
I knew John, yes.
Yeah, okay. He developed a little bifilar coil that had two windings on it, and one winding was the trigger winding, and the other winding was the pulse winding, and these were wound around a ferrite coil that increases the magnetism quite a bit. And what happens is you put a little magnet on the bottom of the pendulum, and as the pendulum swings past this little coil set up at the bottom of the swing, it generates a trigger pulse. The coil moving past the magnet, or the magnet moving past the coil, will generate electricity in it. And that triggers the gate of a transistor, the base of a transistor, or the gate of a MOSFET, high energy switching transistor. And it turns the transistor on, and that is connected to like a 12-volt battery, and so you get a brief pulse of electricity in the pulse coil, and that happens just after the pendulum goes just past the bottom of the turn, and so that pushes the pendulum a little further along on its course. That trigger pulse, it's oriented so it's in a repulsive mode to the magnet. So what happens is every time it swings past that coil, it gets a little kick, and that's enough to keep it swinging and overcome all the resistance losses. Well, the amount of electricity, the amount of electricity you're generating from the crystal is a lot more than it takes to run this little pulse coil. So now you're getting free electricity out of this little machine, and it'll just keep going now as long as this thing doesn't wear out, which could be a long time. Okay, that's one idea. Another one I'm going to talk about, Thomas Bearden's invention. It's called, he calls it the Motionless electrical generator. And basically what it is, it's a flux switch. And he got the idea from another guy called Timothy Trapp. And Timothy Trapp originally invented it. And Bearden got the idea from him. And basically what it is, you got a big permanent magnet sitting in the middle of this device. And then it has a steel chassis that goes across the magnet, and the flux can go either two paths in this crossbar. It can go either left or right. And there's a little coils that you put on called control coils at this point of the machine. And then further out, it's shaped like kind of like a infinity symbol, where you got two courses or two enclosed magnetic paths, and these little coils on top switch the flux from the permanent magnet first through one side and then through the other side. And so what you have is, from a permanent magnetic field, you create an alternating magnetic field, and that's what you need in a transformer to convert magnetism to electricity.
No moving parts.
No moving parts. It's just you have a little circuit that sends these pulses to either side of this circuit that first gates the magnetic flux from the permanent magnet through one path, and then through the other path. It alternates, and so one coil gets energized, and then the other coil gets energized. And I actually built one of these in my lab, and I got it to. It did work. It got 3 times more energy out than in when I had it all in resonance. That's the other thing, you have to have it resonating.
3 times, very good.
3 times more energy out than in. And another fellow, a Frenchman over in France, he has a website, Louis Nadine. He replicated the Meg, and he got about 3 times more too. So we both got about 3 times more energy out than in. But Thomas, I have to say that my electronics was very primitive. I was using a signal generator, and it only puts out about a 10-volt signal. So, but you can vary the frequency.
Mention, in tribute to John Bedini, John, I guess we kind of became friends over the years. He was on the program many, many times, and just discovered and presented a lot of fascinating people and their accomplishments. I've forgotten the names of them now. I'd have to look them up. But one guy was able to put a device in, basically driving a stake in the ground, if you will, and pulling current out of it. He lit up the whole hillside, and this is the 1880s where he lived.
That was he was using what they call the telluric currents of the Earth. There's actually Earth has currents running through it.
That's right. Yeah. Fascinating.
I'll say this about Bendini. I got my degree in electrical engineering in 1982. And in 1985, I read a book by Bendini, and it was also...
It's Bedini, not Bandini.
Bedini. Yeah, Bedini, right.
Bedini.
Right, yeah. I read his book, and he had plans for a free energy machine back in 84. He presented it in L.A. at Auditorium. And another fellow named Watson copied his machine but scaled it way up. And he presented it at a Tesla conference. And Watson's version produced 10 kilowatts of electricity. It was pretty, but then he shut up about it later on. They got to him. And he kind of dropped off the stage after that. But anyway, that's all written about. Bendini wrote about it. But he's the guy who inspired me. I had a degree in electrical engineering in 82. In 85, I read his book, and suddenly I said, oh, my God, all the stuff they're teaching me in schools is totally wrong. There's actually is possible to get free energy. And that set me on my path as a free energy researcher, which I've been ever since 85. I've researched everything that's come out in the free energy fields. And he was the guy who inspired me to get started in that direction. So I give him credit for that. And Thomas Bearden, while Bendini was making the technical stuff, Bearden was explaining all the theory of how it worked. Yeah. And they kind of worked together as a team. And so then I got studying all of Bearden's stuff, too, which he was really a fascinating guy.
He was. Anyway, we had some wonderful communications. I tried to get him on the program. He said, Jeff, I just can't do it. They told me to shut up, basically.
Well, yeah. He didn't want him to talk. He couldn't even, he made all kind of kits, but he couldn't even make a kit for a free energy machine, or they would have got to him. He saw what happened to Watson, so he learned how to keep a low profile.
Yeah. Is Tom, I don't even know, is Tom still with us? I don't know. He was fighting
Thomas Bearden? No,
health issues.
He's the late Thomas Bearden. A lot of these guys, like William Tompkins, passed away just recently. A guy that came up with the ECE theory, Marvin Evans, he just passed away just a couple of days ago. We're losing a lot of good men. Bendini passed away last year. It's really sad. All these people are all going to their going to heaven now.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how much time we got left?
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh my God. Well, there's one other site I want to talk about then. This is called the KESHE.org.
Keshe?
KESHE Foundation.org. Keshe. Yeah, you're familiar with him?
He's an Iranian.
Anyway,
Keshe.
He's Iranian. I'm experimenting with a lot of his stuff now. I'm actually making what he calls gas in a nanostate. They can take a gas like carbon dioxide and convert it into a white powder. And it's called gas in a nanostate, and they created a name called GANS for that. And I've actually made it. And I bought some kits from them. It's very inexpensive, and it's easy to do. And these GANs can be used for, we're using them on plants. They really enhance the plant growth a lot. But I also made a GANs called CH3 GANs. And the CH3 GANs is like a brown color. And you can make batteries out of these things. You can make a permanent battery that just never discharges. And they only put out about a half a volt, but you can string 24 of them in series, and now you got a 12-volt battery that never discharges.
Oh,
you can tie a little inverter.
Yeah,
you can tie an inverter on that, and you can get house current out of it. So, there's all kind of interesting technologies at this Keshe Foundation. I would be really remiss not to mention the fact that they've also got anti-gravity as well as free energy. So it's a site that's worth checking out. It's the KESHE Foundation. Yeah, .org. I should have put it on that list. I didn't think about it till just now, so I wanted to give him a little mention too for people who are interested in free energy. He's also developed a lot of healing technology. It was actually, they had a program a couple of months ago. It was called the Coma Program, and they were looking for coma victims, and they had developed a way to pull them out of their comas. I actually sent a link to a Facebook friend of mine whose relative was suffering from a coma, so hopefully they checked into it, did something about it. But anyways, so it's well worth checking out. And these guys are going global. They've come up with all this. Another thing that these GANs can do, like the CO2 GANs, you can hang a little ball of it, put it in a little glass ball and hang it over a jug of water, and it totally purifies the water. If there's contaminants in it, it just totally purifies them. They're using this stuff in Africa so the Africans can get clean drinking water again. It's really catching on down in Africa big time. So, they've had a lot of advanced technology, and it's based on plasma physics. It's not based on the stuff that we're talking, the stuff I've been talking about. It's a whole new branch of science. And these are plasmas that operate at room temperature. These are not high temperature plasma. And it's all been developed by this guy, Ron Keshe. So I wanted to mention that too. I think we've covered a lot of stuff here, Jeff.
Well, I know we have. You've been a one-man orchestra here. Just extraordinary.
And I really appreciate it if you can get some of that info that I sent you via Frank Chili.
Right.
When you make a recording of this. And put it
I'll
on the
request
internet.
that be done. Don't worry. We will.
Okay, I really appreciate that.
If you'd like to come back on and finish our conversation, you're more than welcome to.
Well, yeah, it's a possibility. I'll have to think of some more material.
The door is always open, so it's here. Thank you, Herbert.
Okay.
Good to talk to you again, as always.
Yeah.
Very, very well.
And you're doing a great job. I appreciate the job you're doing, too, to give us the world some alternate information instead of just all the propaganda we get from the controlled media.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. Thank you, Herbert, for that. Thank you very much. All right, you be well. Take care. Okay. Herbert Dorsey. And look for Herbert's books. They're out there, Dorsey. Okay, thank you for being here. It's Thursday night, Friday, tomorrow morning, and we'll wrap up the week in style tomorrow night. Hope to see you then.